Hello and welcome to MixBus with me, Kevin Paul. This series aims to allow some of the best producers, mixers, engineers and other music industry people to discuss their careers and their approach to music. The success of this series depends on people hearing it, so don't forget to tell your friends if you like what you hear, and remember to give it a 5-star rating, and please subscribe on your podcast platform of choice to make sure you don't miss out on future episodes, special offers and promotions. This episode is brought to you in association with KMR, the UK's leading independent pro audio retailer, and recorded in association with Audient and the ID44. It's also brought to you in association with FilePass, a file sharing platform built specifically for the needs of the audio industry. It allows your clients to hear your mixes in the way that you want them to hear them. Find out more at kpmixbus.com and follow us on facebook.com/kpmixbus and at kpmixbus on Instagram and Twitter. Today I'm joined by programmer, producer, writer and innovator Tim Bran. Tim has been around music and technology for nearly 30 years, working with legends such as Julian Cope, Youth and Richard Ashcroft. He was one of the founders of Rez Rocket, a piece of software that allowed musicians to collaborate in real time over the internet, and he has also been a member of the highly influential dub reggae techno pioneers Dreadzone with his friend Greg Roberts. He's also one half of My Riot alongside Roy Kerr. My Riot have produced and written for such artists as London Grammar, Birdy and James Morrison, and have continued to be one of the most successful partnerships in the studio. Welcome, Tim.
Hello, nice to be here. Oh, I'm in my studio.
Yeah,
I don't need to say it.
Nice for me to be here. Thank you. Where do we start, Tim? How about your love for dub, reggae and electronic music? Where did that come from?
I was thinking about this the other day because obviously leading up to talking about what you've done, you suddenly think, God, especially when you've been in it a few years like me, you kind of realise all the different levels, different places you go with your career. And that was me coming from Guernsey. I'm originally from Guernsey in the Channel Islands, from a quiet little island of 65,000 people for all my kind of, teens and early 20s, coming to London and getting a job at Island Records.
Okay.
And in their studios, not for the record. It was for the record company. I was being paid by the record company. But back in those days in St. Peter's Square, they had 2 studios. One called the Fallout Shelter, which you may have heard of.
Yeah, I remember that.
And it was an SSL deep below Island Records, and there was one opposite as well, actually 2 studios opposite. One was a mastering studio, and then there was a 16 track with like an Atari in there and stuff, and I did actually most of my work in there. They'd just literally say, right, this week you've got this band, this week you got this band. They were very wise having their own studios, because obviously paying for another studio to demo a band is really expensive. Was it really expensive in those days? They thought wisely and had this amazing SSL studio in the basement, which actually most of their stuff came out of.
Wow.
And this other studio opposite. So I worked with some great people in there. It was literally every Monday. I wouldn't know who I was working with until the morning. And then Trevor White, my old boss there, would say, oh, you're working with the guys from BAD this week. I'd be like, oh, wow, brilliant. Or you'd be working with Julian Cope. That's how I met Julian as well. Yeah. So, and many others, some loads of hip-hop stuff. But it was literally like living in Jamaica, working for Island Records back then. I'm probably not like that anymore, but it was really incredible. It was such an atmosphere there. Some of the great people running it. 4th and Broadway were in there as well.
Yes,
so there was loads of hip hop stuff, and it was
because they had although they weren't from the UK, they signed Eric B and Rakim.
Yep.
They had loads of people, didn't they?
It was a real buzzy record company, and so much going on. Like Mango Records was based out there, so it was right across the board. Suddenly, I'd moved from Guernsey literally over a weekend. That's a whole other story. I got the job on the Friday, and they said, "Can you start on Monday?" And I, of course, said yes, and then came over and met all these incredible. I was in with hip hop people straight away, hip hop bands and artists, having not used a sampler before. Suddenly there's an S1000 in front of me. I was literally, I know everyone says this, but I was literally in the toilet reading the manual or going to ask somebody, how do you put stuff in a key group, and how do you make stuff, how do I sample,
Jesus.
Yeah, exactly, it takes you back, right? Yeah. But it was, I literally had to learn it straight off, and then ended up working, like I say, with people like Greg and Leo and Don Letts, who were at the time called Screaming Target, and Julian Cope, and I was basically fell in love with dub, especially. You say reggae, but dub reggae. I just the being able to play a mixing desk was like me playing an instrument. I don't know. why I loved it so much, but I'm a keyboard player.
You're a musician.
Yeah,
that's your thing, piano.
I started
on
studied piano, studied violin and guitar, and played guitar and stuff in bands. But I'd say keyboards and mixing desks are now my instruments. But I just loved the fact you could literally set up some delays and feed them back on themselves, and you sometimes didn't know what you're going to get out of it. Yeah. So it was like a new instrument. It was like, and I've just fell in love with it and decided to try and nail it. And through Dreadzone, of course, that came true.
What sort of music were you into when you left Guernsey?
Oh, I was into like.
Were you into pop
the
music?
Clash and
okay, you were into underground sort of.
Well, not underground, but the Clash and the undertones and the Jam and then obviously through the 80s it was Human League, all the electronic stuff that came out. Oh my goodness, that was like, what is this? Dare, things like that. Human League. Oh, what other bands I was? Oh, Gary Newman I loved as well. Things like that. Just seeing, and then interestingly, Gary Newman mixed the live with the synths, which was like another brilliant hybrid, which is actually, thinking about it, what I'm still doing today. I'm mixing the electronics with Roy Kerr, who I work with in My Riot. We go between the two worlds and mix the electronics and the live instruments. I think that's where most of the magic can happen. I think.
Okay. That's sort of where you found yourself heading towards.
I think so. Yeah, unknowingly, but just electronic. I kind of hit the beginning of, like, I had an early Linn drum and things like that, and suddenly discovering all these samples and being able to mix it all together, and going back to my own studio in Guernsey and trying it all out. I had to try it on other people, actually. I'd get bands in wanting me to record them, and I'd just try stuff out on them, really, and obviously it worked out fine, but I could experiment with adding samples and electronics and effects and stuff.
So that's basically your technique, isn't it? That's who you are as a...
I think so, thinking about it. Yeah.
And your influences, like you say, were the Clash and electronic stuff, and you got into dub. Where were your informative years? Was that down at the bunker?
I think so. I think
that's where you learned your technique. And
it's funny because I went from bunker to bunker, because in Guernsey, my studio, I don't know if you know this, but in Guernsey was occupied during the Second World War.
Right.
So there's loads of German bunkers there. Okay. Most of which are now studios. I've got there. I can name 2 or 3 that are now really nice studios. You go in and go, oh my goodness, there's a high-tech studio. Well, yeah, and what else can you do with a German bunker that's underground? I mean, most people back in the day were storing wine in them and things like that, but there was not much else you could do. So I remember renting my studio. I was thinking about this. I think it was £30 a month I was renting my studio for.
Amazing.
And it was like huge underground labyrinth of rooms. So I went from that bunker in Guernsey, where I was literally trying stuff out and learning how to use a Linn drum and a sequencer, moving to London, then learning samplers and stuff in Island Records, Fallout Shelter, in there, and the room opposite, where actually I did most of my stuff, like I say, in the 16 track, working with people like Julian Cope and Misha Paris and Omar and loads of hip-hop stuff, Overlord X, Black Radical. Ended up playing on loads of stuff as well. Have you? There you go.
I genuinely still got them.
These guys coming in and just flooring me with their rap and stuff. I mean, just incredible talent. And ended up playing loads of it. There was a Hammond organ sitting in the corner, and they'd be like, they'd have the decks out, and they'd go, can you play that? I was like, yeah, sure. So I'd end up playing Hammond on stuff. That's how I met Julian Cope, playing Hammond on stuff.
And then after that, you met Youth.
Well, no, in between that, I did a kind of world tour. Julian, at the end of the album, it was Peggy Suicide. I was involved in that album, engineering that, and Hugo Nicholson did a lot of it as well. And at the end of the album, because I played on loads of stuff, just kind of naturally, I didn't... you just say, can you play some keyboards? And I'd naturally play it anyway. But Julian said, do you want to come on tour? And I was like... Okay. This was somebody who I was playing his songs I was singing Reward and Passionate Friend, in a band when I was like, 14, and he's asking me to go on a world tour with him.
What does that feel like?
I was blown away. I said yes straight away, and then thought, oh no, I've got a job. Hold it. But amazingly, and I still thank him. Well, I'm thanking him now. But Trevor Wyatt, who was my boss at Island, said, "You go on tour with him, you can come back and have your job." And he did the same with Screaming Target. I went on tour with Screaming Target, who were an Island act, both of them Island acts. He said, you can have your job back when you can go on tour with them and help them with the sound and stuff, which was incredible. I mean, that's the win-win. Went on a world tour, Japan, America, with Julian Cope, playing bass and keyboards, and then came back and carried on, and then met Greg Dreadzone, and Leo and Don Letts. And that was, that led it through to to getting into Dreadzone, which was pretty much the 90s. 92, 96 was the peak for me with Little Britain.
Yes.
Signed to Virgin Records, signed to Creation Records first.
Yeah.
Then signed to Virgin, Little Britain, before the TV series. I like to think they might have heard it. That was a big hit, Top of the Pops. Yeah, that album I'm still really proud of, Second Light. It was just everything that was right about Dreadzone and the way we were thinking about the world and Britain and where we were living and the hope and the not hope, things were going on at the time, poll tax and all this stuff. And it all came into that record and really just hit a nerve with everybody. I think it was
quite an apt name as well.
Yeah. And we did loads of touring. We just toured every festival. They're still going. They're still touring.
Do you still do anything with those guys?
Yeah, I've been involved in the last few records. I've mixed the last few records and wrote a couple of albums ago. And always see Greg. He lives up the road. And always see Leo now and again, and Don, and Dan as well. So I mean, keep in touch with those guys, and they're still touring, like I say. So
they're all
still
at
every festival,
aren't they?
Yeah, and they rock it every time. So Left Island Records.
Yeah.
Did Dreadzone.
Yeah.
Julian Cope, Dreadzone. Then discovered technology, deep technology. Rez Rocket, you mentioned them on the intro.
Yes, that's right.
Rez Rocket.
Tell us about that.
Well, it's a long story, but I'll try and condense it. So basically, we figured out, me and this guy called Will Henshaw, who lived here, he's now living in LA, but he was in a band called London Beat, which I produced.
Yeah.
Met them, I did an album with them. Me and him really got on, both tech heads, really musicians, tech heads, just absolutely got on like a house on fire, still good friends. And he was like, let's form a virtual band. It was early days of the internet, really early days of the internet. Will is the kind of guy who doesn't do anything unless it's 100%. He won't just go, let's try this out. So he set up a server, set up an ISDN line, really full-on internet, even though it was just modems and you could barely anybody had ISDN. In Kensal Road, in Kensal Town. Well, it's Kensal Studios, above Eastcote. And we had a big room up there. We had a really fast internet line. We set up servers. We set up a virtual band. Didn't know quite what it was yet. But then we met these two guys in the States called Matt Moller and Canton Becker. They were fresh out of college and they were complete tech heads, but also musicians. So our equivalent in America, weirdly.
Yeah.
They could code though. They could make this stuff. So they'd figured out how to make MIDI work over the internet, even on a modem, even on a cell phone. You could plug your laptop into your cell phone, and MIDI's tiny information. It's kilobytes.
Yeah.
It wouldn't stream it, so just to get technical for a sec, you wouldn't stream it. You'd be running a sequence at your end, and when it came in, it would align with your timeline. So it didn't matter if it was stopped or playing or whatever. It would just line it up with your timeline. So it was a big loop, basically. Yeah. It would come in, and it would play in time with your stuff. And we tried this out with them, and it was really basic software at the time, really basic. But we were like, this is the virtual band.
Yeah.
We can have anybody anywhere in the world playing with us. Yeah. So we did it. We set up, the four of us set up a company called Rez Rocket. That was generated by a random word generator, by the way. Put loads of it. It was actually Rez Rocket Surfer. We thought put loads of cyber names into it, and it came up with Rez Rocket Surfer. We were like, yeah, there you go. It later changed to Rocket Network when it became posh. We were jamming with people all over the world: Venezuela, Chicago, Australia, some of which I'm still friends. Norway, you name it. There was all over the world. Every night, late night, we were just there every night in the studio.
Was it just a hobby at that point?
No, it was never. We always knew we had to see this through. It was like, I've said this since, kind of like holding a holy grail and going, I have to see this through.
Right.
So I kind of left the music. I left Dreadzone. I was producing other stuff as well. So I kind of left Dreadzone right at the peak, really, at that time. And with Little Britain coming out and stuff and touring. And to be honest, I'd had enough of touring by then. I toured for about 10 years and I was really burnt out. I wasn't particularly healthy. I was eating really badly and I was smoking way too much, and it was just all too much. And I was over it. I was really over it. I was kind of pretty broken by that time. Too much touring can do that to you.
Yeah, for sure. A lot of people go through that.
Yeah, it was just becoming another hotel, another bus, and another hotel. And when you don't enjoy it anymore, that's the time to quit. So it was a good kind of time to go, right, I'm going to see this through. So yeah, then we set up a company, ended up like, I don't know how many, 50, 60 people working for us in San Francisco, got highly invested in. Yeah. Paul Allen invested, he started Microsoft, he invested it in the States. We ended up with this massive company, which in the end, we worked with Logic, we worked with Pro Tools, we worked with Cubase. They all put it into their software, and now it's, not many people know this, but it's actually in Pro Tools.
Right.
It's called Pro Tools Collaboration, I believe now.
Yes.
It's just been released a few years ago. It's taken all this time for them to get it in and get it working incredibly well. And also Digi Delivery, which was something else we came up with, moving files. We came up with that as a byproduct of moving stuff around. It was
Digi Delivery was almost working. Yeah, that was highly successful.
Yeah, it was a kind of lossless compression, a way of getting your sessions around, basically, which is what we were doing when we were sending sessions. So jumping back to the MIDI, we got working, and then one day Matt Moller in the States said, I think I know how to get audio working with this. And we were like, what?
Wow.
When can you get this done? And he literally said, I can do this over the weekend. So he went away and coded away, and then whenever it was over the weekend, maybe it was Sunday night or something, me and Will went to the studio and he sent us a bass drum and then sent us a vocal, and we were like, oh my God, this changes everything. So we had to see that through.
That's proper jaw dropping.
Yeah, it was proper. And I think we might have that on film, actually. My friend Rupert's been making a documentary all the time, so one day you'll see that documentary. It's quite a mad story. It ended up getting bought by DigiDesign Avid in the end, and then obviously now they've got Digi Delivery. So cut a very long story short, that's a whole era. But then had to get back into music. I was like, hold it, we've seen that through now. What am I going to do now?
Yeah, because you would have been out for what, 5 years?
Yeah, at least. Yeah.
When I remember you at the Mute Studio coming up to the studio,
that's right.
And you were using the internet connection there.
That's right. I was
like, you were on the floor.
Yeah.
with a tiny keyboard.
Yeah.
I'm just jamming with some guys in San Francisco.
Yeah, it literally was that. Yeah.
He's like, don't worry, just plug me in. And it was fascinating. I mean, it was proper, like, eye-opening, jaw-dropping kind of stuff.
And you imagine having that technology, I had to see it through. There's no way I could have gone, you know what, let's put that aside and that way.
No, absolutely.
It was incredible. And
I said, you were right at the cutting edge there. That was that was when the internet was literally being born.
It was really early days. We ended up...
Every week.
We ended up on Tomorrow's World. Do you remember Tomorrow's World?
I do, yeah.
We did it was live on BBC. I mean, it's the most nervous I think I've ever been.
You must have been very nervous.
I was sitting in the helm in the Maida Vale studios, and with Cold Cut, actually.
Yeah.
And that leads on to how I got back into the music business. But we ended up doing a live thing with all sorts of people all over the world. Thomas Dolby, I think, was in San Francisco, and we had to make a track while they were doing the TV show, basically, and it was absolutely with vocals and everything. Sinead O'Connor was singing.
Did it work?
Literally by the skin of our teeth. Yeah, I had to go and have a lie down afterwards. It was too much. It was like it was too stressful.
Lie down and a large brandy.
I literally had to have a lie down. But yeah, it was amazing. It was amazing. So seeing that through, and then coming out of that, and then I really want to get back into producing, but I didn't really know anybody. Things had moved on a bit. So Matt Black, Cold Cut, got him to thank for this. I'll do that now. Matt Black was with Youth, and I think Youth said to him, oh, look, my programmer's leaving, programmer/engineer. He was leaving, and I stepped in and worked for Youth for about, 5, 6, maybe longer years. Yeah. Made some great albums with him, learnt a lot off him. Yeah. He's a real old school, new school, because he loves technology as well, but he uses many techniques of brilliant psychology. I learnt so much. Can you
describe one of them? Can you think of one sort of thing?
I don't want to give his secrets away, really.
No, I mean, you're here to give the secrets away.
I learned so many things off him, that just getting the band or the artist in the right frame of mind, and that might not be the happiest. That might not be what if it's a sad song? You don't want somebody to be, hey, everybody. Yeah. You really need to feel a poignant moment, or making it a special moment, and just so many little lovely things he would do. I don't know, just
the
watching him work.
of the producer.
I think that's a major thing to learn.
Because he was a musician.
It's not just plugging in a mic and expecting somebody to pour their heart out in that little box over there.
Yeah.
It's how would you ever do that?
Yeah.
And I've used not techniques of his, but I've just thought about that especially with vocals, which is literally pouring your heart out, whether it's a happy song or a sad song. I try and help the singer get into that way of thinking, and however that is.
Do you do that by looking at the lyrics and
usually
thinking about the song? Do you discuss
it could be
the
something
song?
as reminding them what they're singing about.
Yeah,
because they would have sung that song since they've written it maybe quite a few times.
Yeah, maybe
whether it's
times.
live
or
and now you're recording it. You want to remind them what those words mean, whether that is happy or sad or whatever. But just kind of get them in the right place and just. I don't know. It is almost like a psychotherapy. Almost getting. Is that the right word? Psychotherapy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Getting them into the the right mood to go and sing that song, and capturing that's the thing. I never don't hit record. That's a lesson I've learned, where you go, oh, just run through it, and you don't record, and you think that was the one. I haven't got it. So my first tip to anybody is record everything, even if it's just because pretty much the first and second take they will do something that they'll never do again. Yeah, because from third take on they'll be.
Yeah, I think particularly with new people, sort of new artists.
I don't even know about that.
Yeah, the first 2 or 3 takes are the ones where they're not thinking about it.
They're on. They don't know what they're going to do next. Sometimes it's the same with playing a guitar or anything. Sometimes the first 2 takes, when you literally don't know what you're doing, to an extent, you capture things that a little mistake might be the best thing that ends up on the track.
But you have to learn to recognise when the mistake is a positive.
Well, yeah.
Don't you? I mean, it's not as easy as that's a mistake, we'll leave that in.
Yeah, of course.
How do you make that judgment? Is that something that you feel as a listener?
Yeah, it's how I feel. It's literally in my gut reaction to something. If there's a croak or a little moment where they give an emotion away, it's not always good, like you say, but if that makes you feel something, then hopefully that'll make other people feel something.
How do you, when something like that happens, how do you convince the artist that they should leave it?
I think usually they're up for that. I don't know. I think a lot of people are actually up for it unless they really don't like it. And of course, it's their record. I would never impose something on an artist or a band that even if I thought it was the best thing in the world, if they didn't like it, that's their record at the end of the day.
Sure.
And there has to be, I'm not the kind of producer who puts my sound on people, enforces stuff. There's some producers that do that, and you know what you're getting when you go to them, but I can work with many different types of artists.
You started off as an engineer.
Yeah. Engineer, yeah.
Which maybe a lot of people coming into the industry might find themselves in that engineer sort of programmer role.
On the computer,
basically. Just, using stuff, but also being very creative. How do you sort of, when you're working with an artist, how do you find that relationship in terms of offering yourself up, but at the same time not sort of overstepping the imaginary line that exists between the people in the room? Everyone's sort of, the engineer has a role, the producer has a role, even the assistant has a role.
Totally.
How do you sort of learn those boundaries?
That's a really good question. I mean, I there's less boundaries. Well, there's obviously boundaries for me now, but there's less. But there was more boundaries when I was perhaps working at Ireland, and my naivety, I ended up playing on stuff anyway. It was a natural thing. I didn't even think about it. But thinking back, I ended up playing on stuff that I didn't force it on them. But there was like, I'll play this just for the necessity of nobody else could play something. So I ended up playing keyboards and stuff. But then I think I learned those roles working with youth, because obviously he was the producer and I was the engineer / programmer. So I had to get on with stuff. And there was Clive Goddard as well, engineering as well. Yeah. So we literally had our roles within that and pretty much stayed in those roles. But again, you have to learn to bite your tongue now and again. And I now see this from the other side of the coin, where like you said, an assistant is really important, and they're really as important. If you've got the wrong assistant, it can make a session really awful. As in engineer, and everybody is important. Literally everybody who's in that room at the time. And if they overstep their mark or say something out of turn, it's like, it's one thing is like, the assistant might say, this song reminds me of such and such, and what if the artist hates that song?
Very good point.
Yeah, I mean, it's like...
It's a vibe killer straight away.
Yeah, it's like, I don't like this song anymore because it reminds them of that song. So things like that, one comment or you have to be so careful, yet instinctive, and maybe get your point across in a maybe I want the song more like this song. Yeah. So I have to say, well, do you like, you have to steer the artist towards being open to referencing a song, but they might not like that song. So you have to be very careful. Everybody has to be careful and
but at the same time, you don't want to shut down the creativity.
Absolutely,
do you? Because an environment of fear.
Yes, and reticence.
Reticence, it doesn't necessarily. Well, more times than not, doesn't produce something that's original. Or
brave.
Or brave.
Yeah, you don't want anything too safe all the time.
Well, you've never really worked on safe records, really. I looked at your thing yesterday, and even if you worked with an artist that on paper might be safe, your work with them, and that's with Roy as well, was never really safe. You always try to take.
I take that as a compliment. I do try and.
It's trying to take that artist and move them.
Or I use the term magnify. I try and magnify what they do. So even if it was just a person with a piano and a vocal, I try and magnify. What's the best gig they could play? What would be the best sounds to put around that thing? I still want the picture of them playing the piano and sitting there, or playing the acoustic guitar and sitting there, or just standing there singing. What's the world that you want to create around them?
Yeah.
And that's quite hard to do sometimes. But it's like with a singer, you could put any backdrop on them. You could put electronic, you put acoustic, so it's like, what do they want? And you were talking about not, leading them down a musical path. I always get them to send me a playlist of stuff that they're into. So what's their world? What's their parameters? What they like, from this really electronic thing to this really acoustic thing? What's in all those things that capturing their ears and what's making their ears prick up? And I try and follow that path with them and show them stuff that they might not have done. Otherwise, what's the point of me being there?
Sure.
And now and again, I'll be playing something. They go, "What was that?" Or Roy will play some crazy thing he's made out of their voice, or stretching their voice, or making something out of playing stuff that they wouldn't normally like, and they'll go, "Oh, what was that?" So again, we wouldn't put anything on that they hated, of course, but we'll definitely throw things in there that they wouldn't have done, and usually that opens up little Pandora's boxes of worlds that they'll, even for each song. Sometimes their sound will be on one song. And excuse the banging in the background, by the way. My studio is above. You haven't noticed it. My studio is above a scrapyard, which is really old school. But it's I love it because they never complain about the noise. But you will hear them banging boilers.
I'm sure.
I'm used to it. I usually play loud music. So
I want to talk about your relationship with Roy. How did that come about?
Okay, so I met Roy. Jazz Summers, in fact, put us together. We were both managed by Big Life.
Jazz, Big Life.
Roy is still an artist called the Freelance Hellraiser. And he comes from a DJing and mashup kind of background. He did a lot of those early mashups, the Christina Aguilera Strokes one. That was him. So that was his that was his hit as a mashup. He's done many other great ones. And really started that idea off. And then went into remixing and making his own album, which is just about to be re-released, I believe. He came from that kind of world. And I came from the kind of classically trained engineering world. And Jazz put us he always said you two would work really well together. And he put us together for a couple of little projects, little one-offs. We worked on a LaRue kind of remix/mix. And we also worked on a Scissor Sisters track together. And then, literally, the third thing we worked on was the London Grammar album, the first London Grammar. And Jazz was like, right, you two go and produce this, and these guys are an amazing band, and we really want to get this album finished. And we were literally in the studio with them.
That's their first record, wasn't it?
Yeah, the first one.
What were they like to work with?
Fantastic. I mean, they'd never really done a gig. They'd done a couple of gigs at uni. They'd never toured. Yet they had the musical maturity I've never really experienced before. Just the depth of music. They'd be playing and singing, and oh my God, it still kind of makes me wonder how these days. But that was the purity in it, and I think that's what they exuded then, was the purity of, they didn't know how much they had. I think they'd never, like I say, they never toured, it was just natural what they did together. The three of them was just
it's a bit like
exquisite.
When people say someone's cool because they don't realise how cool they are.
Exactly that.
Or how good they are.
Yeah, exactly that. And we went in the studio and pretty much got them to play together. The first thing we did, and that was the sound. The three of them together. That when you have three people in a band, if one drops out, it's a massive silence, and that can be really magical. So Dan would stop playing guitar for a bit, and there'd be just piano and vocals, and then maybe some strings and some sounds from machine or sounds from the synth, and it was just that fragility, and we had to really manage that fragility and not fill stuff up too much. We were always very wary of that, obviously with them as well, guiding the process. And
Well, they were obviously open to you.
Yeah, but
to yourself and Roy.
Very much, and I didn't want them to think we were in there to change them or to, make them into something they weren't. And hopefully we didn't.
And producer, is it? The role of the producer isn't to change a band.
Well, you say that, but
unless it's predetermined.
Some producers are, I think.
Yeah,
that some,
right.
But we didn't want to do that. We wanted to help them open up their world, and I'm really proud of that record. I think that's the most, apart from Dreadzone, Second Light, and a few others, I think that's the most proud I've been of an actual album, and just capturing that magic. And we really did, especially with like, for instance, Night Call, which is a cover of the song from the Drive soundtrack. I just remember it so clearly. We were in the studio one night, and I think the label or maybe the management wanted them to do a cover or something, and I remember Roy saying, "Oh, what about Night Call?" And they were like, "Oh yeah, we love that song." And then Hannah knew the chords already, and Dot went and played something, and I think Dot played drums on that maybe, and Dan was playing the guitar, and they pretty much did it as a live take.
Fantastic! I love that.
And that was in one night, and we were like, "This is," and that's why it's on. Sometimes it just edges into like there's nothing happening, and then suddenly something comes in. It's beautiful moments in that captures them at their best. I think just that absolute fragility, and obviously Hannah's voice is one wonderful. Of the finest voices. Yeah. I will admit, I when we were recording Wasting My Young Years, I did get her to do an extra few takes of the vocal just because I was enjoying it so much. Really? I'd just be sitting there on my own listening to Hannah singing. I mean, what more do you want? Just one more. I was really moved. I remember it was really connecting with me, and and that I knew that would connect with loads of people. Yeah, I just knew it.
Yeah, you get a feeling, don't you? You think, what, this is.
If this is moving me right now, that's gonna. People are just gonna, and I've watched people at Glastonbury watching them live and just being streaming. I'm getting emotional just talking about it.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Just to see that music connecting with people like that, it's really magical.
Well, that's what we live for, isn't it? Really.
That's the most I've seen it connect with people. Again, Dreadzone as well. I've seen that just direct.
But it's a different kind of thing, though, isn't it? With the Dreadzone thing, it's a much more energy.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely sort of, losing yourself. Almost,
losing yourself and being happy. Euphoric state.
Exactly.
Euphoric.
That's it. But so that's a great example of bottling that magic and recording everything and using some moments where there's not much going on, but that silence is as important as the music.
Yeah, for sure. When you start writing with a partner, with someone like Roy, how does the dynamic work there? I mean, is that, do you sort of both know kind of what you're supposed to be doing with each other? Is that a relationship that you sort of instantly fell into, or is it something that you learn? How does the songwriting process begin with yourself and Roy?
I think because he came from a more electronic mashup DJ background, and I've come from the more analog side, I like to think of it as those two worlds. We do cross over. He says, "Oh, I'm not a player," but actually I've heard him play some great keyboard parts and great organ things, and he's
closet keyboard player.
He is. He can certainly play, and he certainly has a musical ear, and
well, for
definitely.
Sure, if he's a DJ.
But he's not trained in that respect, so that's what he means, I think, when he says he's not a musical person. But he really is. He knows what's right and wrong. Sometimes he knows what's wrong and then puts it in, and it's brilliant. And sometimes those moments of not knowing.
Yeah.
Sometimes if you know too much, you think, well, I can't go to that key because that's not a relative major, So I like to think of I love recording vocals, and weirdly I love comping vocals. I don't know if that's weird, but I really enjoy it, and the process of comping a vocal and just getting it to sound as good as it can, I absolutely love it, and it's a real challenge for me, and getting the best out of it, and mixing I love, and the finer detail and crafting and arrangement and recording stuff, getting I've learned at Island Records. I was lucky enough to learn how to put the mics on something and learn what to do. And
how did you learn that though? Because
did you have I did watch in the studio.
Were you on your own in the studio then, or
a lot of the time? But I watch engineers sometimes. I actually learned a lot of a guy called Laurie Latham as well, who produced a lot of lot of stuff. He's still producing now, but a lot of like the Christians and Paul Young and things like that.
Yeah.
He came to Guernsey, and he actually got my job at Island Records. He said politely when they left Guernsey, he said, "Oh, if you're ever in London," he actually set me up meetings, and the first meeting was with Island Records. They gave me the job. But I watched him miking stuff up and using synths in the studio. He just let me hang out. I wasn't doing anything, working for them or anything, but he really kindly let me hang out and learn. I think he saw I was keen, and I wasn't hopefully too annoying in the studio. I kept my mouth shut and watched, you know. But yeah, I just really soak up. Still, every day, you know, I'm trying something out or learning. Yeah. I'm sure you do as well.
Yeah, of course.
Reading something, go, oh, I'm going to try that, you know.
Absolutely. Always following the trying to follow, or trying to, you know, if you hear a record that you like, you think, oh, how are they doing that?
Yeah, exactly.
And you'll spend an hour or two trying to replicate that idea.
That's the great thing about what we do, is that you never reach your best, or you've never done everything.
Yeah.
You've never recorded everything, or you've never mic'd up something in the right way, or you've never used every sound, or it's always a challenge and always well, I just love it. I just love everything about every side of it, really, apart from running off stems.
You're not a fan of that?
Well, who is? Who is? I don't know.
So how do you and Roy typically start?
That was the question. So we came from two different worlds, and I think he tends to go more towards the kind of bass beats, sounds, crazy synths and stuff, and I'll maybe come up with a more kind of melodic, maybe, although he does as well. So we do cross over quite a bit, but typically, you know, there'll be a chord or a sound or that'll trigger something off. And I'm trying to think of an example. We wrote a great song with Aurora, who's a fantastic, if you haven't heard her stuff, check her out. She's incredible. From Norway. She's a wonderful artist. We've done a couple of albums with her, or it was one album that was split into two. And we wrote a song with her, and she came in and picked up, I've got weird instruments around the studio, and she picked up a little thumb piano thing.
Oh, yeah.
This isn't the very one, but it was this kind of sound. Little crazy.
Right.
And she played a little riff on it, and nobody'd ever got anything out of this instrument before that was remotely in tune. And I was like, hold it, that's in the key of D. That's really weird. And we proceeded to write a song with her. And that was the start. That was the little spark that started the fire. And it's sometimes a little chord sequence, or a little synth sound, or a little, even just a drum beat or something, or a bass line, or it's just one thing will trigger it off. And then typically we work with artists who are obviously singers, and so they'll maybe get a lyric idea. It depends on the artist again, of course. If you've got somebody sitting there with an acoustic guitar, if they play piano, then it might be them starting the idea off.
Sure.
So
they might have the chords, or the melody.
Yeah, exactly. Or they might not have anything, and we'll come up with loads of music, and then they'll sit there scribbling lyrics away, and then sing a vocal, and we're like, wow, where did that come from? You know, suddenly you've got a song. So every time it's different. That's why I love it, because every writing session, you don't know what. So you've never met the person before.
Yeah,
most of the time you're walking. It's quite strange walking into a room, and typically with us, the artist will just turn up, say hi, and within an hour before lunch, we'll have an idea of something. Sometimes a lot of
that's quite liberating,
song,
though, isn't it?
It's fantastic.
That's quite exciting.
I love it. And actually, up until the last couple of years, we didn't really do a lot of writing. We were more producing. With London Grammar, we didn't write anything with them. We were just producing. So we went into it as a producing thing, and then thought, hold it, we can write as well.
Yeah.
So we've met some great. And actually, it's a great way to meet an artist or a band, to write with them first, because there's no parameters. They're not coming in with a song that they want produced, and already there's a demo, or you've got nothing. So you can start off like with Aurora. She started playing this little sound, and like, wow, that started off a whole song, and that might then inspire another song, and that, in that same kind of world. So there's not many boundaries as to where you can go sonically, which is nice. So suddenly an artist will come up with a song that they might not have written if they had the chords already, or had they had the demo already.
How do you keep your ego under check? Because, all artists have an ego of some form, whether it's a relaxed ego or quite intense. And obviously you want to feel like you're part of something. How do you manage that when you're working with Roy and another artist, or even two or three people? Is that just your temperament?
I think it is, yeah. I don't want to sound like I'm not perfect, but I don't really try and bring an ego into it. Having another ego in the room. I don't mind an artist having an ego. In fact, if they're a singer and they've got a bit of a attitude to them, as long as it's not nasty, or they've got a bit of a charisma, that's great. That's what you want in an artist. You don't want to shut that down. I don't want to be bigger than in the room than the artist.
That's
I want
what I mean.
them to lead it.
How do you go about not being the biggest thing in the room? But obviously, it's your room.
Yeah,
we're here in your studio. You could quite easily be Johnny Big Potatoes, and
Timmy Big Potatoes,
or Timmy Big Potatoes, more importantly, and direct it from that point of view. Yet we both know that that's not best way to encourage people.
If it needs to be done, then fine. If maybe the artist hasn't got an idea, or they're not, I'll just do stuff, and if they like it, then that's great. Or I'll try something. I'll go down a different avenue and try and help them find that. But I mean, I have an ego, obviously, but I have experience, and I have a confidence in that experience and those multiple situations I've been in, and I try and bring that to them and offer that to them. I'm not here to help me.
Yeah.
My career is obviously important to me.
Your whole career is based on
I've been making my own records.
Yeah.
But it is, and I that's my enjoyment of collaboration, and that's why I work with Roy. I love working with Roy. We can travel really fast on a song. Sometimes I'm comping a vocal on headphones in the room while he's working on something else with the artist. We can literally do two things at once sometimes, so we can do so much in a day or two.
That sounds like that's a great relationship to have, where you're both respectful of each other's talents.
Yeah, we know our strong points,
and you know your strengths, and you say, okay, look, I don't feel the need to be involved in that because I know what I'm doing is really important.
And I love comping vocals.
And you love comping vocals, yeah. Sadist.
Yeah, no, I love it. I absolutely love it.
And it must have been hell when it was tape.
Well, yeah, we were chatting about this earlier before we started recording, weren't we? About recording, doing the podcast like this. Imagine editing that on tape.
Yeah,
You'd have been,
that'd been a nightmare. I had to wait 25 years for the series to be
I caught the end of tape at Ireland. They still had the 24 track, and we were using it a lot, and obviously the 16 track, and we used that a lot. But it was all synced up to the computers, so we'd have the sync even on the 16 track. We'd have that synced up to the Atari, so you'd be running the MIDI off the sync. Along with the vocals, so it was both worlds again. It was the electronic and the analog, so it was mixing. And now, obviously, we do the same, but in Logic or Pro Tools or whatever we're using.
Let's talk about mixing. How do you approach mixing? How do you I give you a song. Where do you start? What do you do?
I sometimes only mix.
Yeah.
But more of the time, I'm mixing something that I've produced. So it's a ongoing situation.
Okay.
So even from the very first day, I'm always in mix mode. I'm not the kind of person who likes to sit there with the guitar really loud going, but that's not going to be that loud later. Obviously when you're recording something you're checking it, but I don't like to not be in a mix situation. I always like to hear it because everything is relatable to everything else. And if you've got a guitar that's really loud but you can't hear the piano, but how do you possibly know they're working together or doing the right thing together? So with that situation, it's an ongoing situation. So when we finish a mix, it's pushing it to the finish line. It's 90% there, maybe.
Right, okay.
80, 90% there. And then we'll go, right, now we'll mix it, which means just really fine-tuning.
Polishing it up.
Yeah, really
focusing on the balance. And
exactly.
EQ. And
but most of it is kind of done, I would say, by that point.
On an ongoing basis as you're writing from the start?
Continually tweaking all the time. I can't help it. I can't help it.
Do you have the image in your head? Because obviously when you're writing, you've got no idea of what that song is. But I presume at some point you do. The idea presents itself to you in a very clear way. And is that the point where you think, okay, I started to build a picture now?
Yeah, but I'm always, even if it was just piano and vocals, or even just I'm always trying to get that to sound as good as it possibly can. So I'll always be going straight for the whatever reverbs, or trying to just inspire sonically as well, not just musically.
Right.
And that can inspire. Sometimes you realise actually I don't need to put much more on because there's enough here.
Yeah.
Just by what I've put on here, or the effects, or I've put a reverb on, and it's fine. But now and again, I do get approached just to mix something.
Yeah.
As I'm doing, actually, funny enough, this next few days, I'm just mixing a few tunes that I haven't produced. I would listen to the ref mix. Obviously, they usually send me a rough mix.
Yeah.
And then I won't listen to it for a while because I'll have gathered the kind of snapshot of what they were trying to do. Then I'll do my own thing and trying to get it sound as amazing as it can. Vocals first. If the lead vocal's not right, I always say this, I've said this for many years, if the lead vocal's not right, it's all over for me.
Right. How would you approach that with the band? How would you approach that with your client? Would you go back to them?
No, I mean, if it's sonically.
Sonically, you mean in terms of the sound?
Yeah.
Okay, not performance.
Not performance, but I'll have listened to the track by then and heard it, so I would have known whether it had been finished or not. And maybe suggested that it needed some tweaks before I even mix it. But I'm not afraid to add stuff as well. I'll always say, look, if I need to add anything or if it's for the right purpose, if it makes the song better or the mix better, then I'll add extra triggers, new drums or something.
Okay. Yeah.
Or add some pads or something. You never know. What I think it needs, I'll try and make it. It won't be something that's totally different to what's going on. I'll try and be as subtle as I can. I'll try and be as complementary to what's going on. But yeah, I'll then listen to the rough mix and I'll switch between what I'm doing and then their mix and go, okay, phew, I'm better than what was going on before and it's sounding a lot better. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's so production driven, the demo or the rough mix, that you have to push it more, and that's the challenge again.
Yeah, sure.
But lead vocal I try and get right first and try and get that sound as great as it can, and then drums and then work in the extra stuff as well, the framework of the song. And obviously, by now I've got a million plugins and outboard stuff that I can usually get a half decent vocal sounding really nice and really good.
When you're producing your own stuff, do you ever suffer from demoitis, where you've done something for so long in a particular way that you can never come away from it, no matter what you think?
Yeah, but in that case I'd probably use the demo. Sometimes
sure.
you just do.
Right,
sometimes,
okay, yeah.
Like we were saying earlier about capturing everything, sometimes we've recorded a vocal or something, maybe it's a piano or something, a guitar, or I've plugged the guitar in here and roughly done something, and then you go into a big studio and record the guitar properly with somebody else, and then you go, actually, whatever's best. Yeah. I really don't mind muting an orchestra if it's wrong, or muting, we did on some tunes, just muted the whole string section. We went to,
just didn't work.
Record. If it's not right, what's the point? It doesn't matter how long it took, how much it cost. If it's not right for the record, why would you put that on?
That takes a lot of bravery, though, doesn't it? That takes a lot of experience.
Yeah, I trust my gut, though. If my gut's telling me that's the only thing I've got to rely on. And we've all got to rely on, actually. There's no rules, is there?
When you first start recording, you record a drum kit with 15 microphones.
Yeah.
And you sort of, in some way, feel compelled to use them all.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot of time for actually go, I only need 4.
Yeah, maybe. Or maybe maybe you do need them all sometimes. It depends.
Yeah,
depends.
But to mute them and to take them out.
Or to trigger new drums off.
Or to trigger new drums, you think.
Yeah. I think whatever's right, whatever your gut's telling you have to go on that. I think that's the one rule that I think everybody should go on, really, if there's one thing to guide yourself by is your gut. And that's what every producer, what every engineer, what every record label, whatever, you go on your gut. You hear a tune and go, that is incredible. I don't care. It's the demo. I don't care if it's taken 15 years to record. That's amazing. That's whatever you've got there is just incredible. And
wise words. What's a process that you do? Maybe not every time, but a lot of the time. Is that a Spring Reaver?
That was my answer.
I just noticed it on the wall there. The pipe.
It is. It's a Great British Spring.
Is that your piece?
One of them.
Yeah? What else have you got?
Well, that and the Prophet, I would say. And the Juno. Oh, how many can I have?
You can have as many as you like.
Okay,
it's not Desert Island discs. You can't just take one. Desert Island synths.
I would say Desert Island synths. There you go. So how would you ask me that question then, Rizzy? Would you
I'm asking that
question.
You
are asking.
What's the piece of equipment that you'd always use?
What's the piece of equipment that I always use? I would actually say, if I had to narrow it down, it would be the Juno.
Yeah? The 106?
Yeah, I've had that since I was, in my 20s.
Amazing.
Back in the day.
So that's like 25
Yeah, that is an absolute killer synth. It always delivers. Yeah. If I'm writing, I pretty much always gravitate to it. I know it's not got a million sounds in it, but the sounds that are in it are just, and I know it back to front.
Yeah.
Weirdly, I can still, if you said to me, get the brass sound from the manual, I could get the brass sound from the manual in about 20 seconds. I know the positions of the faders. It's crazy. They used to draw snapshots.
Yeah,
this
I
is how
remember
you,
in the manual,
even though
I
there's
remember.
presets on it, I don't know, but they'd show you those things. So I
In
can
the
remember
really badly
the strings as
translated Roland manuals.
Yeah.
Like,
but I absolutely love it. And my new acquisition is the Prophet 6, which is like another level. It's like, I absolutely love it. And it's where the Juno ends, it carries on into the rest of the universe. It's got the distortion in it. It's got reverbs and effects and stuff. So you can really, some of the sounds you just don't know come out of a synth out of that thing. And you just spotted on the wall is my spring reverb, which is called a Great British Spring. Fantastic pun. And I bought that on eBay maybe about 6 years ago. And I was obviously with the dub and things like that and reggae, I've used spring reverbs throughout. But that's always like the ultimate for me. It's a 5 feet long drain pipe with loads of springs, 4 springs in it or something. And I have that permanently on the mixing desk here. And when somebody's singing, that is the reverb I put on their voice.
Okay.
And it always inspires. And sometimes it's like, what is that reverb? And I'll end up using it sometimes. I won't. But it's,
do you record
it's such
it down, like to tape?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
to tape?
I'll put the comp through it
computer,
eventually. I'll record the comp if it still suits. But it's such a nice dark reverb that it really glues a track. It's great on drums too, and guitars. Oh, it's good on everything. So yeah, those would be my...
What about your favourite, what about plugin wise? Is there something that you're using a lot of?
Always, this is giving away my secrets.
Yeah,
They're not really secrets. I love the Valhalla reverbs.
Yeah, everyone's saying that. A lot of people are saying that.
And they're so
I've
cheap.
been using them for ages.
I've been using them I absolutely love them.
The Shimmer.
Yeah, love them all. I mean, they're just really good. And they're cheap.
Yeah, $59. It's
yeah, something like that.
You're not going to get a better deal. Yeah.
I love the UAD stuff.
Yeah.
I've got a UAD Apollo here.
Is that your interface?
Yeah.
Is that your interface now?
So I've got some nice choice ones, obviously, all the compressors and reverbs and the EMT plate and all that. I use quite a bit of wave stuff as well. The CLA compressors and stuff are very good. Yeah. I still gravitate towards them. Got so many plugins now. You got to, especially with Black Friday just happening, I've got myself a few more, swagged a few more bargains. But I try and, it's like one of those things where when you start, you think every plugin is the answer to all your problems. Oh, my mix is going to be so much better with that on the MixBus or that on the drums. Actually, it'd be interesting to set a challenge for everybody just to use the internal Logic plugin and see how well you did, because I bet actually a lot of it would be as good. I would miss a few of those choice plugins. The UAD EQs, the SSL stuff and all that, the E-Series EQ and stuff. It's just brilliant. And it takes me back to my desk days. Don't know if you noticed, I've got this Behringer X Touch in front of the computer there, just behind my computer keyboard. And I feel like having faders in front of me makes me feel comfortable. When I don't have it, when I'm somewhere else, I feel really, I don't feel complete.
Yeah, a bit naked.
So just grabbing seeing the vocal up and grabbing the vocal, the touch fader, and being able to do a ride on it or something, or just grab a few and do a drum balance. It makes me feel more comfortable. I've come from that mixing desk background, and I love getting in. The room next door to mine here. We're currently sitting in my kind of writing mixing room, which isn't a massive room, but it's lovely, and I've got all my synths here, and I'm very happy here. But next door is a lovely big Neve room with owned by Brendan Lynch.
Yeah, it's a lovely.
He's got a lovely live room in there as well. So if I need to do something, drums, guitars, whatever, I go in there, and we typically go in there. Or Rack, where Roy is based, we go in there a lot as well. So. And pianos and things like that. But yeah, so I can go in there and get excited about the mixing desk and all the outboard, and there's tons of it.
Yeah, there's loads of lovely preamps in that room.
Beautiful.
Lovely.
Max Hayes, who's the engineer in there, absolutely knows it back to front. He gets the greatest sounds out of that room. It's just incredible.
That's what it's all about, isn't it, really? Knowing the room.
Yeah. And I try and bring some of that into my Logic sessions. So, for instance, I know a lot of people will put a reverb as an insert these days, but I set up my sessions like my outboard. So I'd have one long reverb, one short reverb, couple of delays, I'd use those on the buses. Yeah. So I'm sending lots of things to them, not just one thing for one thing kind of thing. So I still treat it like an outboard. It's just inbuilt. That's the way I tend to work. But
the last section is dither and delay, and that's not about the technical dither and delay. That's about what you try to avoid in the studio as opposed to what you like to do?
Well, exactly that, dither and delay. I don't like things stopping. I don't really like pauses. If there's not something happening in the studio, I like to keep things moving, because that's the point where everybody can go down rabbit holes and logic can kick in. You know, I was saying about going on my gut earlier.
Yeah.
That's everybody goes on their gut. And once you start to let logic kick in with music, especially, I can't do that. I can't use that. I recorded that on a bad mic, or I took ages doing that. But that's no reason to keep something.
Yeah.
If it's not right, it's not right. So as soon as you start to let logic kick in on music, it's that's for me kills the vibe, as Sigrid says. So I don't like dither and delay.
Sure.
I move pretty quick, and musically and production wise, I like to get the essence of what's going on pretty quick, and I know Roy does too as well. So we tend to get somewhere really quick and not let anybody look down any rabbit holes, because you can start to, you know.
That's a good way of putting it. Rabbit holes is a good way of painting that picture of what you talk about, stopping the process and not allowing people to use logic. I quite like that.
And also, if you know, just do something else. If something's not working, work on something else and then come back to it. And actually, probably then when your gut's telling you again, then that's when you'll know what to do. Usually, if I don't listen to a mix for about 3 or 4 days, I'll play it, or I'll play it in front of somebody else. How weird is that when you play a mix in front of somebody else? You hear it differently?
Yeah, always.
I don't quite understand the psychology of that, but I know that it works, and I immediately know what's wrong with it. Yeah. It's too fast, it's too slow, that needs to come up. The vocal's not loud enough. There's
I agree.
It's not right yet, it's not finished. Whatever I thought when I was on my own, I immediately know. So having not listened to something for a few days is another one as well. Leave it. Just leave it. Why force something? It's music.
We have that luxury, don't we, nowadays with the computer? We have that. I mean, obviously, in days gone by, you went in at 10 in the morning.
Very true.
And you could not leave the studio until it was, in brackets, finished.
Very true. Maybe that's why we don't get so many crazy late nights anymore, because we can actually stop and work on it a few days later.
A bit more civilised.
Yeah, a total recall. And, you know, that we used to have to, well, not me, but I know I did for a while, writing all the settings down on all the delay. It'd never come back the same.
Too many late
But at
nights.
least oh my goodness, taking photos of of all the settings on all the delays and reverbs, but those days are. I mean, some people still do that, and there is a magic in that. Of that's what we did, and it's done, and that's it. We did a mix, and that's it.
For sure.
Whatever. And sometimes there is great work come out of that, because you have to be right there.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the other flip side, is that.
Well, it's like making choices, isn't it? It's like having 8 tracks as opposed to 800.
Yeah.
You've got to make that choice, haven't you?
Absolutely. And some of my early days of recording was on a Tascam Porter Studio. Do you remember the 4-track cassette?
Yeah.
And so I listened back to some of that stuff, and it sounds great for what it was. And you had to make decisions, like you said. You had to bass and drums. You had to bounce on a 1 track.
Yeah.
Beatles style, So you had to make those decisions, and that's what it is. And you had no choice later. So sometimes you had to get it right. And I think there is a thing of actually, you have to make decisions, even in these days of 1,000 tracks possibilities. It's about the music, not about the technology. The technology is the enabling.
Yes.
That's the other thing. I hate technology getting in the way of something. If I'm trying to get something set up and it's just not working, I just get so frustrated.
You just go straight on to something else.
Something
it's like,
else.
no, this is not working. I'll come back to that.
Yeah, because that's the worst thing.
That's the rabbit hole.
Yeah, it is.
Isn't it?
It is. You're losing, especially when you're writing. I'll get something down, even if it's on a voice note or whatever, because great example, that song we wrote with Aurora, All Is Soft Inside, it's called. She started on the thumb piano. We wrote the song with her, went for lunch, recorded her voice, the melodies on my phone, which I still have. I found it the other day. Came back from lunch and she sang something totally different. And I remember going, but that's not what you sang earlier. That's not as good as what you... And luckily I'd recorded it on my phone. And she was like, oh, yeah, you're right. Actually,
always recording.
And that's
even
the
on
song.
The phone. That's amazing.
That's the song. And we wouldn't have had that. We'd have forgotten it.
Yeah. Or it would have been something different. It might have been slightly almost there, but it wasn't that.
Yeah, it wasn't that.
Magic.
And thank goodness, because it's just a great song. It's one of my favourite things I've ever written, really. Yeah, record everything all the time. Like we're recording this.
Oh, yeah,
you did press record.
Yeah, we are recording, yeah.
Oh, thank goodness. Don't want to do all that again.
Yeah, should we go for one now?
Yeah.
I think that's a lovely way to end it. Tim, thanks for your time on MixBus. It's great to see you. Thank you very much for listening to this episode of MixBus with me, Kevin Paul. Don't forget to give us a 5-star rating and subscribe to the whole series on Podbean or wherever you get your podcasts. Remember to join me for the next episode, and until then, goodbye.